From the pages of the Whispering Ledger, we uncover the accounts that were never meant to be settled, stories of darkness balanced against the ledger of ordinary life. Today we open a new entry, a case that details a profound betrayal of trust, a story of a family that on the surface was a portrait of compassion, but was in reality a monument to unimaginable cruelty. This is the case of Howard and Margaret Foing, and the children whose names were entered into their home, only to be lost. In 1978, the quiet, idyllic town of Milbrook, Pennsylvania, became home to Howard and Margaret Foing. He was a wealthy investment banker from Pittsburgh. She a poised former pediatric nurse. They purchased a sprawling Victorian mansion on Elm Street, a home that had sat vacant for so long the locals had nicknamed it the haunted house on the hill. The Foing spared no expense in its restoration, transforming the decaying relic into the town's most admired residence. They were, by all accounts, the perfect couple, impeccably dressed, elegant and generous, but they carried a private sorrow, an inability to have biological children. For Margaret, who had always dreamed of a large family, this was a deep source of pain. So when the Foings announced in 1980 that they had adopted a son, James, the town of Milbrook celebrated with them. At last, Margaret would be the mother she always longed to be. But a subtle, unsettling possessiveness was there from the start. At the church blessing, she clutched the baby like a precious object, reluctant to even hand him to the pastor. At the time, it was seen as the endearing anxiety of a new mother. In hindsight, it was the first sign of a darkness that was beginning to take root. The adoptions continued with unnatural speed. Within 5 years, James was joined by Elizabeth, Thomas, Catherine, and William. The family was large, beautiful, and notably isolated. Margaret homeschooled the children. They were rarely seen playing outside. Playdates were politely but consistently declined. The children of Elm Street were a mystery, silent figures in a perfect house. The first crack in this perfect facade appeared in the summer of 1987. 9-year-old Thomas fell from a tree and suffered a severe arm fracture. Instead of seeking immediate medical help, Margaret, drawing on her nursing background, attempted to set the bone herself. Her attempt was a disastrous failure. By the time Howard rushed the boy to the hospital, Thomas was in septic shock from a raging infection. The attending physician, Dr. Sarah Chen, was troubled. The injury was bad, but the boy's reaction was worse. He was unnervingly stoic, his eyes darting to his father before answering any question, as if seeking a script. When Dr. Chen requested Thomas's medical records, Howard became hostile, claiming they were lost in a fire. Suspecting medical neglect, Dr. Chen filed a report with Child Protective Services. A caseworker investigated. He saw a clean home, well-dressed children, and heard a convincing explanation from a remorseful Mrs. Foing. The case was closed. And with the seal of approval from the authorities, the Foings continued to expand their family, adopting 3 more children by 1990. The whispers in the community grew, but no one dared to challenge the town's most respected benefactors. The truth began to surface in 1992 with the arrival of the Fletcher family. Michael Fletcher, a journalist, and his wife Susan, a social worker, moved in a few doors down. Susan's trained eye immediately saw what others had missed. The Foing children exhibited the subtle, heartbreaking signs of trauma. The flinching at sudden movements, the vacant expressions, the constant, fearful monitoring of their mother's face. Susan befriended Margaret, hoping to learn more. During visits, she noticed a locked door on the 3rd floor, from which she sometimes heard faint crying. Margaret dismissed it as the groans of an old house. Then one afternoon, Susan saw a face in that 3rd floor window, a young unknown girl who vanished the moment their eyes met. Meanwhile, Michael Fletcher's journalistic research into adoption fraud revealed a pattern of corrupt agencies that had been shut down in the 1980s. The timeline, he noted to his wife, matched the Foings' earliest adoptions. Before Susan could act on her growing fears, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. In the spring of 1995, from her deathbed, she summoned a junior detective named Richard Cooper. She gave him her file, a collection of meticulous notes, dates, and observations, and made him promise to investigate. Cooper kept his promise. He found that the Foings had used multiple agencies across 3 states, often making large donations to expedite the process. He uncovered trust funds for each child, but with cruel stipulations. The money was only accessible if they never sought out their birth families. It was all about control. A former housekeeper, Maria Vasquez, provided a terrifying glimpse inside the home. She described a regimen of psychological torment, of constantly changing rules designed to ensure failure and punishment. And she confirmed Susan's fears about the third floor. 3 rooms, always locked. She was ordered to leave food trays outside the doors, but was forbidden from ever looking inside. The sounds of children weeping haunted her, and she fled the house in terror after only 6 months. The final piece of the puzzle came from Emily Fletcher, Susan's daughter. Inspired by her parents, she conducted her own research and discovered a horrifying correlation. In at least 3 instances, shortly after the Foings adopted a child from a specific region, another child, always from a vulnerable, marginalized family, would be reported missing from that same area. Cooper now had a pattern. He bypassed his reluctant chief and took his evidence directly to the Pennsylvania State Police. The case he presented was no longer about neglect. It was about kidnapping and possibly worse. A search warrant was issued. On the morning of October 23, 1995, a convoy of unmarked cars descended on the mansion on Elm Street. Howard Foing answered the door, calm and collected, as if he were welcoming guests. Margaret, however, became hysterical. The 11 known Foing children were found sitting silently in their rooms, their faces empty. They responded to questions with robotic, scripted answers, but the true horror lay on the 3rd floor. Behind the 3 locked doors, officers found 3 children living in unimaginable squalor. They were skeletal, non-verbal, and terrified. They were not among the official Foing adoptees. They were ghosts in the system, with no birth certificates, no records, no legal existence. The investigation uncovered Margaret's leather-bound journal. In its pages, she laid out her twisted theology. She believed children were born with sin that had to be purged. Her adopted children were the Redeemable, whom she could purify through discipline. But the sin had to go somewhere. The hidden children were the vessels. In dark rituals, she would perform a transference, casting the sins of the Redeemable into the vessels. Once a vessel was full of sin, they were to be discarded. A search of the property's woods confirmed the meaning of that word. Investigators unearthed a shallow grave, then another and another. They found the remains of 5 children. Howard, in a plea deal to save himself, revealed the locations of more graves on other properties the couple had owned. In total, the remains of 13 discarded children were recovered. They were the forgotten ones, taken from migrant worker camps and impoverished neighborhoods. Children whose disappearances had barely registered. Margaret Foing was declared mentally incompetent and committed to a psychiatric facility, where she died in 2008. Howard was sentenced to prison, where he died in 2011, maintaining his innocence and blaming his wife's delusions. The fates of the Redeemable were tragic. Some struggled with severe mental illness. One took his own life. Another simply vanished. Their lives, too, were a form of sacrifice. The house on Elm Street was demolished. In its place stands a community garden, where 25 trees now grow, 12 oaks for the children who survived, and 13 willows for the children who did not. It stands as a memorial, and as a chilling reminder that the most monstrous acts are often committed not in the shadows, but in plain sight.